What made you realize there was something off about your friend so? In person he, the so/husband, was quiet and kind. But she, the friend, told story after story about his pill popping, fraud, suicide attempt, and general emotional abuse. She left him. I had a falling out with her. I caught her in a couple of lies and I just abruptly ended the friendship. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, my husband had befriended the so at the gym. My husband didn't care this guy had a bad reputation as painted by his ex-wife. He was a cool gym buddy. About a year after I ended the friendship, I became friends with her ex-husband. It's been 3 years of friendship now. Every time I'll learn something cool about the guy. Marine. Passionate about his kids. Solid hard worker. True and loyal to the core. We often compare stories. I'll tell him her side of a story and how badly she painted him out to be. He'll either tell me his side, which is black and white opposite of what she said, or he'll flat out deny such a story ever existed. With proof. So, the moral of the story is, while I thought something was off with him, it was all proof that something is off with her. Don't believe everything you hear. Edited to delete the word X from Marine, as suggested. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Posted this a few days ago, but my wife's best friend's husband. I never got on with the guy, while everyone else did. I found him to be very know-it-all, and if you had done something, he had done it 10x better. I'm sure my wife had a thing for him. It was always Rob has done this, and Rob has done that. Ain't Rob a great guy? Tracy is so lucky to have Rob. Why don't you and Rob go fishing? Why don't you and Rob go for a beer? To keep the peace I would, and each time I spent time with the bloke, I disliked him more and more. Something just didn't feel right about him. I ended up telling my wife that I can't handle the bloke anymore, and that I wouldn't have him round our home again. She had the raging hump, called me an unsociable TW, jealous knobby CT. 2 weeks later it came out that Rob had been beating Tracy, was a raging alcoholic, mentally abused his kids, and was banging a skank called Chi from down the road. Now everyone thinks Rob is an absolute cunt. Edit. My missus is getting quite a bit of grief now. No one knew how much of a evil cock Rob was apart from his wife and kids also. She calls me a knob, TW, bellend, dickhead all the time, and I reply with minge, wizard sleeve, thundercunt. Pretty sure that's normal in the UK. She was super friendly, but I'd catch her looking at me out of the corner of my eye with not a nasty expression exactly, but not a friendly one either. Sort of wary. I'm also a girl. She'd also casually say odd little details when talking about her life that made it seem like she had a pretty skewed idea of relationships and gender roles. She went to an all-girls boarding school and even though she was 24 she was the first of all of her friends to ever have a boyfriend. Like saying it's ridiculous to expect a woman to change a light bulb on her own, haha, or making out that some things were a big deal in relationships when they're really not, as if she'd got all her knowledge from rom-coms. Just really tiny things that wouldn't be significant on their own, but added all together it really set me on edge. She ended up going full on psycho and not letting him see any of his friends or do any of the things he enjoyed for 2 whole years because she was basically jealous of every single other woman in the world, even his male friends' girlfriends. It took his brother to come round and have good long chat for him to realize she was a control freak who was ruining his life. It was a timely escape too, since she was starting to talk about babies. I have 6 sisters. I have, unfortunately, met a lot despicable d-bags. The one that immediately comes to mind is my sister #CE''S ex-husband. Let's call him Dean. Dean seemed like a cool, rather nerdy, introverted, sweet guy, except that he had shark eyes. When he smiled, or laughed, or anything really, he looked closer to pain than joy. I was never too comfortable with him, but I wanted my heebie-jeebies to be wrong. #CE seemed genuinely happy. They married. Then a few months later during dinner, my sister spilled some wine on their new tablecloth. Dean fractured her wrist, burst a blood vessel in her eye, and threw her down the stairs. They are now divorced. I'm still angry about it. TLDR fact Dean. Edit. A word edit the second. Thank you all for your kind words. I'm trying to get to everybody but I'm having a rather difficult time of it. Edit the third. To everyone asking how the faker is not dead, my sister didn't tell us until she had secured a retraining order. I found out last of my large family as I was in rehab at the time battling a painkiller addiction and the douchebaggery that comes with it. Edit the fourth. Credit to you /nerd N1 clarification to TLDR. Do not fuck Dean. Avoid Dean. Run the fuck away from Dean. Dean is a violent psychopath. Edit the fifth. Clarified a paragraph. Ugh. The year me and my, now ex, visited my best friend for Thanksgiving. This is a fairly long story by the way. I tell this story to people all the time because she's just an awful human being, and this story was just a perfect example of it. In 2009, we traveled from South Carolina to Orlando to stay with my best friend Tom, of about 22 years now, and his then girlfriend, Lauren. We decided it was too expensive to fly up to New York to see our families, so we drove down a few hours to have a friend's Thanksgiving. We used to be roommates, and he is a badass cook, so we figured, let's do this. So he and I spend all day shopping, cooking, etc. and dinner rolls around. So we have the usual spread, turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, rolls, and it's all sitting on the counter. We go in the living room to get the girls. Lauren comes in first. Lauren goes into the cabinet and pulls out 3 to 4 large Tupperware containers and says, hang on. Nobody take anything yet. I need to make sure that I have leftovers for work this week. Proceeds to take about 60% of each dish, leaving it so everyone has extremely small portions, with no options for seconds. Also takes about 85% of the white meat, because reasons. Puts all her Tupperware in the fridge, and then grabs a plate. From the already small amount remaining, she takes about half of each dish, and slops it in her plate and walks into the dining room. Me and my girlfriend look at each other, take small plates, and go sit down. My best friend was visibly upset, but didn't know what to say. She eats about half her food, then proceeds to throw what's left on her plate out. Now to clarify, Tom has the biggest heart of anyone I know. He's a 6 feet 5 inch guy who has a heart of gold and would give you his XL shirt off his back. Why he was with her, I don't know. He had a good job, making 50k plus. She was not a large girl, average build. Worked at an architectural firm doing 3D renderings. Fairly book smart girl. Not starved for money. Important for story reasons. I really wish that were the end of this, but fast forward to the next morning. Tom decided he was going to make some turkey soup with the leftover carcass and meat. Yum. Big giant pot, lots of gooders inside. Now at the same time in between watching the soup, he had been browsing Craigslist at the time for an Xbox 360 and came across someone who was willing to meet that day. So he puts the soup on super low, and we all decide to go out and get his Xbox. Lauren says, oh, I'll get it for you as an early day present, and I think, wow, maybe she's not so bad. So we go out, buy the 360, on our way home. Now literally the second we walk in, we could dig in on turkey soup. But, as we are about 4 minutes from home, Lauren is hungry. She says, I want a double cheeseburger from McDonald's, so she can dunk it in her turkey soup. Tom argues that food is ready, we can see the driveway, but she makes him go to McDonald's, so she can get a double cheeseburger. Okay. She's the only one who gets anything, and we get home. She rushes to the kitchen, gets a huge bowl, and proceeds to take the large ladle and scoop right from the bottom, filling her bowl with most of the goodies and little soup, leaving mostly broth for everyone else. Goes into the living room, sits down and eats, while we stand there dumbfounded. Almost there, I promise. We make our soup, sit down, eat, and Tom wants to set up his news box. Lauren doesn't really respond as she's dunking her burger in soup, stuffing her face. So he gets it set up and fires up Dragon Age, just playing around with it. Lauren has now had enough soup, which by the way is her burger, and about 3 spoonfuls, gets up and throws out about 75% of her meal, walks over to the TV, turns off the box, and says, okay, you played enough. I want to watch TV now, and ending with, well, because I bought it for you, I can decide when you can use it, and when I want to watch TV. Mind blown at this girl. The next day couldn't come any faster. Earn story. Absolutely mesmerized by her and how she can be so selfish. About a year later, by the way, he went to work, waited until she was gone, came home, packed up his sheet and left, never speaking another word to her again. Being the nice guy he is, he even left her money for his portion of the rent for the remaining months on the lease. TLDR best friend with heart of gold dated a selfish monster for years who had no regard for common courtesy. Edit. For anyone curious, he is now engaged to a wonderful girl that is a very big part of our small core group of friends. She treats him extremely well, and he's way better off now. They also live together about a half a mile from our current house, and our dogs are absolute best friends. Edit 2. Had the wrong year. Also, lots of questions about why he even stayed with her, or if we talked about it. We had a lot of conversations about it. At the end of the day, it was a comfort thing. They own 2 dogs together, different than the beagle in the picture, and he would have had to save up money to move out to his own apartment and maybe some other reason that I don't know about. I think we've all been in those toxic/abusive relationships where no matter what, we are in them for way too long. Not saying it's right, but it happens. He knew he was in a shit spot. Also, yes, he took those bucks, lol. That was about the only damn thing aside from his clothes. Edit 3. Thank you anonymous giver of gifts for the gold. First one, and never thought this would blow up so big, haha. I'm glad that everyone is enjoying the story, hating the girl, and virtually high-giving Tom. Some strange part of me feels like he's getting some form of retribution as over 6k people have seen her monstrous ways. Thanks all. Trying to answer questions as I can hear. It started moving real fast all of a sudden. My best friend's ex-boyfriend walked like he was trying to intimidate people. And every time he asked someone a question about someone's opinion, hey, what do you think of that statue? Do you like sauerkraut? He'd respond to their answer with, I had a feeling you were going to say that. It seems harmless, but it was every single time, and if you called him out on it, you couldn't possibly have known I was allergic to X. He lashed out in anger. Every time she tried to break up with him, he cornered her and wouldn't let her leave the room until she relented, and even their couples therapist thought she should leave him for her own safety after 2 or 3 sessions. He would wait for her shift to end just sitting in his car in the parking lot, and if she didn't come out fast enough he'd storm into the building in a fury, but if she came out on time he'd just leave. He wasn't there to pick her up, just to monitor her. Which he also did through a GPS tracker he put in her car. She now has a restraining order and has moved twice. He broke into her apartment with a gun while she was deep asleep and just snuggled up behind her with the gun between them, as if it was his dick, and that was how she woke up. There are other things, but this is getting long. Edit. Because people are not curious about other things, he did help me move, but only to find out where I lived. After their breakup he came to my door several times looking for her, and when she was generally not here he settled for monitoring my house. Extreme fitness nut who was obsessed with telling people whether or not he could bench them. Hint, usually not. Lots of gaslighting. Don't remember the details. Insisted on changing her cat's name, which didn't stick. Wouldn't let her not watch TV with him, even though there are 100 things she'd rather do than watch TV at any given time, up to and including a pap smear. This inspired multiple fights, charmed her parents so successfully that they insisted she go to couples therapy to work out their differences, which were, I don't want to be constantly monitored. Also, your general controlling behavior is creepy vs you have nothing to hide if you're doing nothing wrong. Ultimately their breakup was supervised by the couple's counselor, who had building security waiting in the lobby and her hand on a panic button, who knew she'd have that stormed into her work when she quit post breakup because he decided they fired her, and his plan was apparently to threaten them to get her job back. Took her to court to argue against the restraining order. Judge looked at friend's documentation and how she was leaning away from him even on opposite sides of the room, and he was making kissy faces at her, and granted the order. Made very public posts on some weightlifting social media thing about what a crazy ex-girlfriend he had, and linked her profile in his own profile. Me and my cousin grew up together like brothers. I immediately knew his new girlfriend didn't like me from the looks she would give me or how blunt she was when I tried to engage her in conversation. A few months down the line and I try and arrange a meal with my cousin. Asked him to bring his girlfriend along so we can break the ice. Everything was arranged. I showed up at the restaurant and they didn't. I was stood up. They are now married and have 2 kids. I wasn't invited to his stag night or his wedding. I was, and still am, gutted. I met my wife and invited him to my stag do. He was all paid up and I couldn't wait to see him again. It was the thing I was looking forward to the most. He didn't show. Again gutted. He and his wife showed up to my wedding and acted as if there was no problem. It was quite strange, but I didn't care as it was great to just spend some time with the man I had considered my brother. We kind of kept in contact via text, but never met up, even though I tried to arrange it a few times. Then my son was born. I was desperate for them to meet each other and bent over backwards to meet up. I agreed to meet at a play area so his daughters could tag along and go play, and he got to meet my son, who is named after his brother who passed away. I sat there for an hour before he messaged me to say he wasn't coming. As a final attempt to salvage some kind of relationship, I invited his family to my son's christening. I got a message an hour after it had finished to say he wasn't going to make it as his wife had arranged to do something. That was 4 years ago and I haven't heard, seen or spoke to him since. Still makes me sad, but as long as he is happy, then that is all that matters. Edit. Just to expand a little, I have tried to contact him many times via text, phone, Facebook message, but I haven't had a response. I don't believe he is happy, but I don't know enough about his relationship to pass comment. He has cut me off and there is nothing I can do to change that. I just hope that one day we do get a chance to sit and talk it through, just so he knows I don't hold anything against him or her. If he wants me to be part of his life, then great. If he doesn't, then at least he knows I still love him. Long story. Best friend was adopted as a kid. Adoptive parents killed in a car accident when he was 11. He was in the back seat. He survived. Became even better mates. Same schools and college. He decided he was gonna marry this girl. I was happy for him, but I had never met her as I lived out of the country at the time. So wedding is in 6 months. I fly down to see family and end up going with the girlfriend and some friends, and we all meet up at a local restaurant. Meet his fiancée. She seems nice and welcoming. She flirts subtly with me. Nothing major, but talks about my appearance quite a bit in front of her fiancé. I think nothing much of it. Later in the evening I go to the bathroom. I end up walking to a cubicle, and as I enter she jumps in front of me and closes the door with me inside. I ask her what she's doing. Her response is anything I want. I immediately push her out. Sit down and in shock. Have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I go back to the table. I'm quiet. I realize that I should tell or say something to him. I pull him outside and tell him what happened. He is too in shock. Ruins the whole evening, and next day I flew back to my hometown with my girlfriend to see my family. We don't speak for months until the wedding. I'm his best man. Whole family was after me. Bride hated me. We don't speak anymore, but I know what happened, and friends support my decision to tell him. He claims she says it was all a misunderstanding due to being drunk. I know what I saw. I know what happened. I know what she was trying to do. I feel bad because I have probably lost a friend, but my conscience is clear. Good luck, Philip. A bit of background. This was a good friend of ours and previous roommate. At this point he'd moved out about a year and a half prior, and we'd only had internet contact with him since. It was a meetup of old friends when we went to visit home. This was the first time we, wife and I, met his newest girlfriend after his previous long-term relationship ended. She wasn't so bad, kind of giggling and goofy for him, since he's a bit more serious, but fine. They seemed happy. We were out for dinner and her and my wife go off to the bathroom. I thought this was odd, since my wife is kind of a tomboy and doesn't do the whole girls go to the bathroom to do their mac-up and gossip thing, but I find out later friends so invited her to ask her a few questions about our friend. Well, after about 20 minutes went by, I realized they weren't back yet. We were both tipsy and engaged in conversation and time got away. This was a small gathering of a few couples, and one of the other girls goes to check on them. Come to find out, friends so basically had my wife cornered in the bathroom, crying in her face and demanding to know why our friend had a secret crush on my wife and why he wouldn't admit it to her. After getting the recap from my wife, she said she had no clue if the girl was going to attack her or molest her, since a few times she was apparently completely against her to the wall. Apparently it was a mixture of my wife wanting to calm her down and also a little afraid, since she was half this girl's size and legitimately couldn't get past her, that caused the long drawn out issue. Luckily the person going to check on them snapped the girl out of it and defused the situation. Very bizarre. We've seen her one time since, not exactly on purpose, and she acts like the whole thing didn't happen. She apparently has no history of mental illness, but I have no clue beyond that. When my best friend and his so started in an LDR, I didn't think much of it. But when she would repeatedly make fun of him to her friends on Twitter, I brought it up. She repeatedly cheated on him and acted like they weren't serious at all. Told my friend again because he was head over heels. They finally broke up because of a fight over something unrelated to the things I brought up to my friend. Then they got back together and my friend used the stuff I told him to make a stipulation that if she wants anything to do with him, she has to be serious. For whatever reason she stuck with it. She started pulling him away from me gradually. Quick flashback. When his ex gave birth to his 2 sons, I dropped everything, was late to work because of one of them, and spent as much time as I could with them. When I had my daughter, I invited my best friend not once, not twice but 3 times to meet her. He couldn't be bothered to come to the hospital. Not because of work, but because he needed to be on the phone with his girlfriend. I burned that bridge so quickly. Now they are engaged with a kid of their own. He moved to Florida for her and is an alcoholic now. Good riddance to both of them. I met them as an already married couple and everything seemed fine until she went into labor at my house. It was her 2nd child, so she knew it was early labor and decided to rest on our couch while we hung out. We were going to watch her older child when she went to the hospital anyway, and our house is 30 minutes closer to the hospital. So it made sense for the 3 of them to hang around our house until go time. That's when my husband and I started noticing her husband's strange behavior. He was a very charming guy and a very good father to his son, but he started making fun of his wife during contractions. He would roll his eyes and tell her to shut up if she even made the slightest groan. He joked that she was a pussy and was overreacting. The whole situation got so awkward that my husband insisted he go home to get their hospital bags, just to give the poor woman a break from her crappy husband. A few months after the birth of her 2nd child, he hit his wife with his car while she physically tried to block him from leaving during an argument. He disappeared for days and didn't come home until she proved to him that she hadn't gone to the hospital or contacted the police. Thus began systematic abuse that continued for 2 more years, and she hid from me like an expert. He would hurt her and then threaten to withhold money for groceries if she said anything to anyone. I knew he was a dick, and I knew she often needed me to pick her up to get food from food pantries because he was bad with money, but I had no idea he was hurting her. She finally left him after he threw her through a window while she was 8 months pregnant with their 3rd child. The story doesn't end there. After the divorce, he and his friend started making child pornography. It started by giving meth to teens and then filming them having sex. Eventually, they were molesting his daughters, ages 18 months and 3, while taking video. When the older daughter turned 4, she told her mom what was happening and the shit hit the fan. Now he's in jail for a long time. Female friend dating this bloke who was just real dero and stabby looking. Now, I'm no prize pig myself. I'm no stranger to a bintang singlet and a 30 to go with me prawns on a hot Christmas day, but I just got a vibe from this guy. He had a budgie that seemed to slightly change color/markings through his Facebook posts every month or so. I brought it up with a mate, and he said I was just imagining shit cause I must wanna root my friend. She was hot, but not imagining pets suspiciously changing color cause something was up with the dude rooting her hot. Turns out he had a real temper and would accidentally kill the birds in rage, then later replace them to get another chance at doing the right thing, while also not putting himself as a bird killer. She left him when she found out. He admitted it when a bird suddenly became not tame at all, because 1 what the fuck, and 2 one of them shows like Dr. Phil or The View or something said it was a red flag for Abusive meant to hurt animals, so she was like nope, and said if he contacted her she'd get a DVO. He had trouble with the cops already, so he faked off surprisingly readily. Not sure if the RSPCA did anything about it in the end, but she falsely accused her cousin of rape. He ended up being jailed, lost his green card, and deported. The nail in the coffin was when she slept with his older brother. Reddit. I didn't make myself exactly clear. Let me clear it up a bit and expand on how psychotic this woman is. When she was 15 she accused her older cousin of rape because he turned her down for obvious reasons. The question was, when did I realize my friend so was nuts? Well, my best friend married this woman when he was 18. A year after that the false accusation came to light, a month after that, in a series of events that just didn't add up, I uncovered her affair with my friend's brother. When I told my friend about the situation, he accused me of wanting to ruin his relationship and basically cut me off. In the years after, it was constant fighting between them. She faked 2 pregnancies to keep him around while still sleeping around. One day, 10 years after being with her, my friend says he's had enough. He leaves her, finds himself another girl, and doesn't live happily ever after. Because his ex filled their kid's head with lies, somehow the divorce went completely in her favor, and she kept it all with an obscene amount in alimony and child support. The man is a responsible father. By the way, did I mention this woman is my wife's cousin? Yeah. After me and my friend restarted our friendship, she spread lies that I was trying to get at her, thinking he would have an issue with that. It caused a major strain between me and my wife. I could go on and on about her, but I'll just cut it here. She was in a poly relationship, a guy and a girl, but I always knew something was off about him. She lost her virginity to him, so to speak, and was still very monotone and disinterested when talking about sex. She could talk about the girl with some enthusiasm, but every time she told me how great the guy was, there was something off about her tone, like she was trying to convince herself. Turns out he invited her, 18, living on her own, suffering severely from unmedicated psychotic symptoms, over to hang out, and she thought it was safe because his girlfriend would be there. He ended up rapping her in front of the girlfriend and informing her that they were all in the relationship together now. She was already not sleeping 4 days on end, having constant panic attacks, and having trouble telling what was real and what wasn't before this happened, and I really think it was just easier for her to pretend it was normal. The relationship lasted about 2 weeks, and when she said she wanted out, he would stalk her by showing up at her work and sitting there for hours at a time, or standing across the street from her house and just watching her as she walked home at night. It went on for about a month. I didn't know about most of this until after it had happened, and I've always wished I could have been able to do something about it. That was years ago now, and she's medicated and living with family and doing a lot better. But sometimes when I think about what those 2 weeks must have been like, I lose my shit. TLDR, if you have even the slightest instinct that something is wrong with the way your friend talks about a partner, please pry. Be rude. Do whatever you have to do until you're satisfied they're safe, because maybe I could have saved my friend a lot of pain and trauma, and I didn't. She has no concept of reality. One of the first nights we hung out, she talked about how their relationship was equal parts storybook and fate. They had been dating for about 1 month. Reality. She was a massive rebound and trapped my friend with a pregnancy. Here's the full story. Steve dated Jenny for about 5 years. Jenny was smart, beautiful, and kind. Steve is an idiot and cheated on Jenny with Kayla. Jenny never found out, but her and Steve broke up. Steve started to date Anna. Anna was fun, cute, and caring. They dated for about 4 years. Steve is an idiot and began cheating on Anna with Kayla. Anna and Steve broke up. Anna came 2 hours early to move her stuff out of their apartment and found Kayla in the bed. Now Steve is with Kayla. Kayla truly believes their story is of romance and not of Steve repeatedly betraying his past girlfriends. On the first night we hung out, I drunkenly told Steve that he needed to do whatever it took to get back with Anna. He desperately told me that he ruined it, and that wasn't an option. All of this was directly in front of Kayla. About 6 months in, Kayla and Steve went on a mini vacation. Kayla got sick and put on antibiotics. The antibiotics messed with her birth control. Kayla got pregnant. Steve married her. During all of this, Steve was telling me how it was a short-term fling. Fast forward about 6 years and another kid later. Steve is clearly miserable. We stopped visiting them because Kayla makes my wife upset. We'd come over to their place and Steve would be trying to parent and control the kids, while Kayla would sit on the couch and watch TV. As if we drove an hour to spend time with her. No story better illustrates his misery than my 30th birthday party. Steve and I have been friends since we were 5. The day before my 30th birthday he called and said he couldn't make it. I thought that it was weird, but whatever. I'm an adult. About 6 months later I found out the reason. It made me despise Kayla more. Kayla got fired from her job. She had been unemployed for about 6 months. Steve works 40 hours a week at a distribution center. To make up for Kayla's lost income, he was working an additional 40 hours a week answering tax questions from his home. My friend was working 80 hours a week to support his family and handling child care. Kayla turned down job offers because she thought they were beneath her. Basically, don't cheat. Karma is real. Throwaway. For obvious reasons, I always knew from the very first time I met him that he was a bad person. Charismatic, charming, affectionate to her. But his eyes were empty. They married 14 years ago when she and I were in 11th grade. She just turned 18, had a horrible home life. She unofficially lived with us, my parents being more of parents to her than her own. He was a bit older and had enlisted in the military. This was during the height of the Iraqi war. A month before he deployed, after they had moved 3,500 miles away, he beat her in a drunken rage. After she discovered he was having an affair while he was deployed, he won her back through emails and phone calls. He came home far more damaged than before. Things seemed okay for a few months until she walked in on him in their bed with another woman while their infant son slept in a bassinet beside the bed. She naturally threw the chick out before trying to make him leave as well. He broke her phone and her jaw. She was still thousands of miles away from me, but I'd packed a bag and drove for days to get to her. She ultimately took him back, and things seemed to stabilize. 3 more children and many years passed without incident. When their youngest was 2, he beat her again, this time in front of their children. Police were called, and he played the role of victim, using his PTSD and other post-military diagnoses. She has no job, no high school diploma. She dropped out to be a military wife, and no family to fall back on besides me. We offered to have her and the kids move in with us temporarily until she got on her feet, but she chose to stay. Recently, she and I drew up a notarized document stating that I'm to get their children if something were to happen to her caused by him. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it never comes down to that. Was best friends with a dude, I'm a lady. Had been for a few years. Never any chemistry or anything like that, at least on my end. He gets out of a long-term relationship, starts dating around. He'd often introduce me to these ladies as sort of a barometer of whether or not he thought they were a good match. One weekend he invited a girl out with our group. She's super standoffish, won't smile, clearly isn't having a good time. I try to talk to her, get to know her, try to tell her about my friend and how great he is. She acts like I'm not there. Might as well have been the wallpaper. A month later I'm on a date and we run into them. Remember, I'm also on a date with a man. As they are leaving they come over to say hello. She seems equally unhappy to be alive. I introduce my dude, the 3 of us chat for a minute while she stands there. I jokingly tug at his shirt in a "you old dog" kind of way. She storms out of the restaurant. Both dudes are confused. Was not a flirty touch of any kind, more like a bro touch. Anyway, next day at work, I work with this guy. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, you can't do stuff like that." She's really damaged. Has jealousy issues. Doesn't trust men. I apologize profusely because I didn't realize I had done anything wrong. Even asked my date, and he was baffled as well. This friend had an emergency key to my house in case I ever got locked out. He returned it a week later, citing something about what if you call at 2 a.m. But isn't that the point? Isn't that what best friends do? Help each other in times of need. Flash forward a few months in. He refuses to speak to me. Again, we work together. Won't look me in the eye. He slowly gives up other relationships, male and female point. After dating the girl for 6 months, they get engaged. Now married. No idea how it's going, or if he's happy. I ended up moving, and haven't spoken to him since. Makes me really sad to see people give up who they are for a relationship.